I'm really looking forward to our topic today. It is the topic of vulnerability. BT Gregson is our host, so I'm going to turn it over to you, BT.
Hey, thank you so much, Leslie. Today, we're going to talk about vulnerability. The intention for me today is to provide an opportunity for you to begin to get a little curious about vulnerability and use it in microdoses through the course of the day to get some experiences and see what your results are. Another added benefit, really, that I'm looking to do is provide this from a guy's point of view, right? What vulnerability means to me as a guy. And for all the guys who are listening today, maybe give you a different point of view on vulnerability. And for all the ladies who have a guy or interact with men, maybe give a little bit of different perspective and understanding, an opportunity to maybe even educate guys around vulnerability. So I think it's just best to start like over from the overall context of how I got where I did. So when I think about as a boy, we played outside and we used to play war, right? So we used to play army for sure. The older kids who would be the leader, they might say something like, hey, we must watch our northern flank because it's vulnerable right now. And on growing up in an athletic family, on any given sporting event, and you can still see this on any given Sunday if you watch football, the star safety's out, so the secondary is very vulnerable. The quarterback's probably going to exploit that. So that was the association with the word vulnerability. And what I wanted to share is what was going on in the culture at that time. And what did that look like growing up? So I'm proud to say, first and foremost, that I am an Xer. So for all you Xers out there, I say that with swagger. And I hope you enjoy that shout out for us. But really, as a Gen X male, this is what I grew up into, right? I grew up with like invincible action heroes. So we think about a Schwarzenegger or Stallone and all those action movies that we saw and how I associated like this is what men are go to be. Mr. Mom, as an example, is a comedy. It has to be a comedy, right? Because hey, the woman's the breadwinner and the guy has to stay home with the kids, right? That's has to be, it's not real life, right? It has to be funny. And then the guy on the bottom left here, who you may not recognize, is a bodybuilder by Dorian Yates. And I put Dorian here because I would say Dorian would be responsible for supersizing the male physique as we know it today. So if you think about when you first saw Arnold Schwarzenegger up top, the size of him, you're like, wow. Then you see someone like Dorian, and Dorian just dwarfs as you just in these pictures. So this is what was happening with the society and the culture. And as a young man and a young boy growing into this culture, I want everybody to know I never saw Predator, I never saw Rambo, and I never saw Mr. Mom um, until I think I might have saw Predator in my 30s, right? I never seen Rambo still. So, but nonetheless, this had a huge impact and influence of what a man is supposed to be. And if you look at the pictures here, I would just be curious to see if you can find anything that resembles vulnerability to your definition today. So then I was most recently, as recent as 6 months ago, I was in training and I overheard somebody say, hey, you got to check out Brene Brown around emotions. So I can't help myself when I hear something about a book or something to check out to learn a little bit more. So I got Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown around emotions. And I was like, wow, this is really great. I never knew there was a difference between jealous and envy. Or I didn't know there was a word called hubris. I thought that might be a side dish someplace. So I learned quite a bit, right? And I was like, oh, shame. Oh, that resonates with me. I can get behind shame. And then I turned the page, and the next page was vulnerability. And I said, well, Miss Brene Brown, this does not apply. I'm going to skip this section. And that's what I did. And then I turned a page and I saw this. This is Brene Brown's definition of vulnerability. Sounds like truth, feels like courage. After I kind of like poked up my jaw and like came to, right? Because it's kind of a jab. I've never saw vulnerability expressed this way. I went back to read the section. So in preparation for this microdose, I wanted to see where in my lifetime have I witnessed and also experienced vulnerability? And what were the results? And what kind of around the curiosity around that? So in 1997, Ellen DeGeneres on her show had an episode where she came out. To me, that sounds like truth, feels like courage. You think about the time that was in the period, if in the history, if you're not from the Gen X area or prior, take a look. Because there was some backlash on Ellen on that. The good news here is she persevered, right? She lived her truth and she lived through courage. And as we all know, Ellen went on to be the voice of one of those characters, and don't ask me which one, but also, of course, her television show. And when she was removed from her television show, she didn't stop. She went back to stand up. And I don't know if anybody saw her stand up on Netflix, but she mic dropped it. She nailed it. She still has it, right? So she had to go through this to be herself, to live there. The other example that came up to me was 1991. There was a popular late night TV show called Arsenio Hall. Arsenio had Magic Johnson on because Magic Johnson, the day before, released that he had the HIV virus. Now, in 1991, the association with HIV was different. It was probably a death march, right? The lifetime for someone with HIV was very short. And Magic went on Arsenio Hall the very next day, and he talked about the HIV virus and the impact that it had. And for those of you who don't know who Magic Johnson is, Magic Johnson is probably one of the top 3 NBA basketball around in the 80s and 90s that drew the more revenue. Extremely popular, championship basketball players. But he went on the show the very next day to talk about this. But that took Magic to be very courageous. He didn't have to do that. And that's his truth. And he looked at it from a different perspective. And I would encourage everybody just to take a few moments to watch it, to understand what his perspective is. Now, today, Magic Johnson is still alive, right? And that was 34 years ago. And if you watched it in 1991, you probably said like, oh, man, maybe like a year. But he's still with us. Not only is he still with us, Magic has gone on to he owns a little bit of the Washington Commanders, which is an NL football team. He owns a little bit of the basketball league in LA. He also owns some of the Lakers. He also owns movie theaters. He also owns part of the Dodgers. So he's done quite well for himself, living through his truth and courage. So inspired by these 2 examples, I went into my own life and I said, okay, so where do I have a vulnerability? And what has it provided me? So for me, one of the most recent ones around vulnerability is I have created a blog around my philosophies of life, the benefits of what have experienced, the ups and downs, and all around, to share with people with hope that just impact one person per day. It takes a lot for me to get started with that. There was a lot of negative self-talk around you don't write, who cares, you're not, a PhD, all this type of stuff. So that took a lot for me, but it's my truth. I live this every day. And it took a lot of courage to hit that post button. It might be you might be able to relate. But at the end of it, it gives me so much joy and pleasure. And it's a creative outlet for me. It's fantastic, right? I wouldn't consider myself creative until I'm there, writing. I get Jackson Pollock. It's unbelievable, right? I'm like a whirlwind. It's a lot of fun and I enjoy myself. And folks seem to like it. The other one kind of goes against Mr. Mom. So again, the world was a little bit different 20 years ago when I approached my boss and said, hey, can I please work a compressed work schedule? so I can be home with my daughter on Friday. That's a good lot of, that was my truth. I want to be a dad. And it took a lot of courage to ask that, but I did. And I'm here to tell you that was the most rewarding thing I ever did, to go on the line and be vulnerable and maybe be laughed at because I'm be considered a Mr. Mom or whatever it may be, whatever the ramifications of that, to understand that this is my truth and it feels like courage. And wow, I am so happy. 20 years later, I have magnificent relationships with both our children. I got to witness first steps. I got to feed. I got to change diapers. I got to have them take naps on them. It's just, the memories are golden. So when we think about my results, vulnerability is a multiplier of positivity, hands down. It's provided me a more meaningful, fuller, enriched life. It was missing. It was something that I was, for years and decades of my life, all my life, except for up to 6 months, right? I didn't know I was being vulnerable when I was asking these questions. It also provides me excitement and enthusiasm. So for going at this, I would just first and foremost ask it, when you get bumped up against about, oh my goodness, what will people think of you, or your judgments, or those types of things, just ask yourself, is it true? Will it really be that bad? And just trust yourself and have that courage. And then the recommended resources here, I mentioned about Atlas of the Heart. That's the one I got. I also got Daring Greatly. Daring Greatly is more geared toward vulnerability. So if you wanted to check that out by Brene, she does a great job. Also, Brene is on Netflix. She's on YouTube, as well as The Magic, and on Arsenio and Ellen. I want to leave you with, for especially for guys who might be listening, by not allowing vulnerability into my life by this definition, I was missing out on a great deal of happiness and joy and just a full life. And for all those guys out there, it's strength and courage. So when you think about these guys up top, they were strength and courage.